Hey listeners, it's Tim. Can I just grab a quick minute before the show starts? As you've probably heard, Top Music Live, our dynamic 2-day in-person conference for music teachers, is being held in Sydney during the Term 2 Australian school holidays over the 15th and 16th of April 2026. Our presenters have now been announced: Dr. Anita Collins, yours truly, Elisa Milne, Samantha Coates, Rebecca Stewart, Mark Matthews, Paul Myatt, Amber Hammond. The list goes on. It is an incredible lineup, and I just cannot wait to share this experience with you. This innovative event is unlike any other conference you've attended, unless you came to Piano Pivot Live in 2020, of course. We'll have amazing keynotes, interactive workshops, live on-stage teaching demonstrations, and opportunities to connect with fellow educators, all in a welcoming, relaxed atmosphere with full catering. See the complete 2-day schedule and book your ticket now at topmusiclive.com.
When we think about burnout, right, maybe you're in a place where you're working you're doing 1,000 different gigs, or you're just working so much, right? Time feels like it is so scarce. And the impulse can be that you need to do less. But I don't think that's actually the solution. Because when I think about burnout, usually it means that your life is imbalanced in some way.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hello there, everyone. I am so glad that you are listening today, and I think you are really going to enjoy this episode with my guest, Sarah Whitney. If you have ever looked at your career or your life or your studio and thought, how did I even get here and what's next? This episode is going to help you out. We talk about burnout and building a career that actually gets you excited to get out of bed in the morning. I loved getting to know Sarah and her work, and I think that you are going to as well. Here's a little bit about Sarah. Praised by the Washington Post for her marvelous violin acrobatics, Sarah Whitney is a widely recognized performer, teacher, speaker, and career and leadership coach for musicians. During her tenure as violinist and founding member of her acclaimed string quartet, she performed concerts worldwide, received the Concert Artists Guild Grand Prize, and had 3 albums reach the top 10 on the Billboard charts. She is also founder and artistic director of the interactive concert series Beyond the Notes, and her diverse career has included everything from performing at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center to sharing the stage with Adele and Ed Sheeran. As a career and leadership coach for musicians, Sarah uses her unique mix of mindset, strategy, and business savvy to help busy professional musicians stop surviving and start thriving, building careers filled with clarity, confidence, and creative fulfillment. She is currently on the faculty of the Longy School of Music and New England Conservatory and has given lectures and masterclasses around the world, including at the Curtis Institute, the Juilliard School, New England Conservatory, Rice University, and Oberlin Conservatory, among others. Here's my interview with Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited about this episode today. So to start with, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. My name is Sarah Whitney. I'm a violinist, a speaker, and a career and leadership coach for musicians. So as a coach, I work with driven musicians to help them build thriving careers without burning out. So I use a mix of business strategy and mindset strategy to really unlock all of those things that are getting in the way between where you are now and where you want to be.
Oh, I love this topic. We're going to talk about burnout. We're going to talk about having a career as a musician and, what that looks like. So to start off with, is it actually possible for a musician to have a fulfilling career that doesn't feel stressful and burn them out?
Yes, absolutely. I really believe it is. And I've seen it done. I think I've worked on my career so much to get to that place. And I think a lot about how we're trained as musicians, and it doesn't always add up to support what you just said. I think we're trained to be really driven, to work really hard, which are all really great assets. And one of the reasons why, we're all be able to create what we do. But I think when it comes to fulfillment, one of the biggest disconnects is we lose track of what we want, right? We very much live in the land of what we should do or what we feel we should do or what we've been told to do. And at a certain point, we need to be able to start asking ourselves that question. And that's where I see one of the biggest disconnects that kind of makes or breaks that, if you will, right? And that's where we lose that fulfillment. We lose agency over what we're doing and why. And that's when we really start to feel unfulfilled or disconnected or on autopilot. But it's absolutely possible. And I think, that's why I do the work I do.
Yeah. And from my experience in music school, I feel like the violinists and the pianists are most guilty of this. Like, we have to practice all these thousands of hours, So how do we, and it does take so much work to become a professional musician. So how do we start to balance this out in our career?
Yeah, it goes without saying that we need to, work on our craft and pursue it with, pursue excellence with our craft. Of course, it goes without saying. But I think, how do we pursue this in our career? I think a lot about how we ask that question of what do I want, right? And it also is related to our definition of success. I think a lot of unfulfillment also comes from lack of clarity. We can say, well, I'm not fulfilled, right? But if you haven't actually gotten clear about what you want, you're going to stay in that place of being unfulfilled and sort of feeling like there's nothing you can do about it. So it has to start with asking those questions. And the thing is, from my experience as a coach and a lot of the conversations I have with my clients and musicians, those questions are not easy to ask and answer honestly. It takes courage to ask yourself what you really want. It takes courage to spend time thinking about something you want to create, even when you don't know how it's possible. And it's in many ways much easier to stay in the familiar of where you are, maybe not fully fulfilled, but it's familiar to you. You understand how it works. You know how to make it work. It can be easier to do that rather than really look at what could be possible. It takes courage, right? It's scary to think about what you can create, especially when you don't know how it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really powerful. And I find my mind going to like my own self and my career. And I'm like, okay, I can't turn this into a therapy session with Sarah.
Ask me anything, Rachel.
I would love to hear a little more about your journey. How did you get to this point? How has your career focus maybe shifted over the years, and how has that informed where you are today?
Yeah, my career has shifted a lot over the years. So I guess I'll give you sort of like the quick version to start, just to give an overview, and then we can dive into any other aspects if you're curious. But I'm a violinist. I went to school for violin, performance, undergrad, masters, all of that. And I very much was on the path to be in an orchestra. When I was in school so many years ago, that's what you did as a violinist. No one really talked about any other paths, so that's what I did sort of blindly. And there was a moment during my master's career when I was at a music festival. I remember very specifically where I was sitting in orchestra the moment I had this thought. We had orchestra every day from like 10 to 12. And I remember sitting there and going, I actually don't think I want to do this orchestra thing for a living. And it was that moment of, don't think so, which was exciting, but then also followed by, well, then what am I going to do? Right? So I started exploring and thinking about other career paths at that moment. And long story short is I met my former string quintet, Sybarite 5, at the Aspen Music Festival and ended up moving to New York City to build that group, which in hindsight, it was one of the best things I ever did, but it's kind of funny because when I got asked to do it, it was sort of like, move to New York, dedicate all your time to something that won't make you any money. It was sort of this like dream. I was young, I was in my late 20s, but it was sort of like, wow, like could I make a living as a chamber musician? And not just as a classical chamber musician, but also the group we built was a string quintet, so it was unique just by instrumentation, and the repertoire we played was also very unique. Lots of different styles, folk, tango, rock and roll, classical, which also to me was, it tapped in a lot of my interests. So I started out in that point in my career out of school already doing something a little bit different. And then we built that group up and it was incredible. We toured the country and the world and did some really amazing things. And I was living in New York City at the time, and it was a lot. The touring, the crazy schedule. And I was sort of skirting with burnout. I was working a lot. Don't think I knew what a weekend was. It was just constant. And then the pandemic hit. And of course, all our touring went away. Everything shut down. And I finally had time to think. I finally had time to ask myself some of those questions that I posed earlier, right? Like, what do I actually want? Not just in my career, but in my lifestyle and in my personal life. Like, I started asking these big questions. And that's really when I made a huge shift. I decided to leave New York City. I left the string quintet. I moved up to Boston. And then I started building my coaching business. And the coaching business came out of a couple things. It came out of my desire to really, I felt in my journey as a musician, there was so much I didn't know. And I wished I'd had more tools. And I also encountered a lot of musicians who hadn't really been able to develop things they wanted. And with my quintet, I was so lucky, right? I mean, building a chamber ensemble and making it successful is so hard and so rare. And I was part of that process, and I got to live that. And then I wanted to bring other people that fulfillment and satisfaction of having an idea and turning it into a reality. And I realized through a lot of the things I'd done, that's what I was really good at. Taking an idea, turning it into reality. So I was able to translate my skills into being a coach. And the rest is history, I suppose. But does that sort of give you an overview? And I'm happy to go into any more of those pieces in more detail. But essentially, I shifted my life hugely, right? From a touring artist working 7 days a week, gigging and running around, to really being the creator of my lifestyle and career, right? I work more like 10 to 5 hours. I still perform, but I take the gigs I want to take. And performing is not my livelihood. It's not what I rely on for my income. And I'm able to craft things on my terms rather than the gatekeepers of the freelance scene or whatever it is. And it's been a huge shift in how I experience everything.
Yeah. Okay. There's so much in that. I'm going to ask you a question, and I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I feel like so many musicians, they might have an idea of what they want, but there's this reality that they need to make a living. And sometimes the two just don't really line up very well. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think one of the biggest in that question, right, what I'm hearing is that, so maybe they're not fulfilled. They kind of know what they want, but they're stuck in something that they need to do in order to, make enough money and make their living. I think the myth, if you will, is that you have to change everything. And I think a lot about, that situation, I totally get it, right? That's frustrating when you find yourself in that space. But sometimes I see people say, well, there's nothing I can do. I have to keep this job because it pays my bills. Now, I get it. I'm not suggesting you quit the job right then and there. But my question would be like, okay, where are the corners of your life that you can do the things that are fulfilling? Because if you stay in that victim mindset of like, well, there's nothing I can do, that's going to perpetuate itself. You're going to stay there. And it reinforces that belief that you don't have a choice. And I want to challenge that. Now, you may not have a choice to leave that job entirely that you don't love, but what can you do, right? Where can you look for things that are inspiring or collaborations or little things here and there? How do you be a detective in your own life to figure out what those things are, right? And then who knows where that's going to lead, but it has to start with that. And it can start small. And it's never too small to make a difference.
I like that. Start with what you can control, right? And see what happens. We never know where it's going to lead.
Part of it is building that muscle of agency, right? If you're not used to feeling like you have a choice, that's a really unempowered place to be. And as we start building, and it's like a muscle, because if you don't work the muscle, it's not strong. And so you can start to work it little by little. And the more you start realizing the choice you have and the agency you have, it grows, right? And then maybe when you're in a different space, different headspace, you're more connected to it, then it might seem more possible to make bigger leaps. But if you are stuck in that place of you don't see it's possible, I wouldn't make a big change, because you need to have that mindset of possibility and agency, because that's the foundation of it.
Mm-hmm. I find myself as a musician, I hear this from a lot of other musicians, living in this mindset of scarcity, thinking that I have to, work so many hours just to eke out a living. Can you talk a little bit about that and how maybe you've overcome that in your own life?
Totally. And that is also so related to our culture. I mean, it's a really huge thing that we deal with as musicians, not only just the music community, but our culture as a whole, right? The arts are historically underfunded. And there's the whole, like, have you ever heard anyone say, oh, what, you're a musician? You get to do what you love for a living? Oh, you must so lucky. You must be so happy, right? There's this, and you probably don't even care if you get paid or not. I mean, there's a lot there that is coming from our culture as well. So it perpetuates this scarcity mindset. And I think about, I guess I share that because it's not your fault if you find yourself there. I mean, there's so many factors that contribute to that. Well, I think it is also related to the whole conversation we started with asking yourself what you want and giving yourself permission to do that, and with agency, right? Because what scarcity mindset is also rooted in, like, I don't have control. I have to take every gig that comes my way because there won't be enough, right? It's very much an external force is controlling that, right? It's a feeling of like, there's nothing I can do. So I think they're all really interconnected. And when you start to bring back agency, you start to say, oh, I do have choice, right? And so I think that's where it starts, because scarcity is very much something that we feel like we can't change.
No, I think that's very wise what you said. And this next question might come back to that. I don't know, but I'm curious. You work with a lot of top tier musicians. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see musicians making as they're trying to build their music careers?
I'm hesitant to say a lot, but kidding. Well, but I joke about it because it's different with so many people. But yeah, when we're young as musicians, I think there's a different mindset, right? Just being out of school, being new in the professional world. I believe that there is so many benefits of saying yes to a lot of things. I think about some of the things I said yes to when I was young in New York City that blossomed into opportunities that I couldn't have even thought of. And how me sort of saying yes to something I didn't totally know what was going to happen was such a benefit. And there's also things I said yes to that I realized later, nope, definitely don't want to do that. I think there's so much value in that. But I see people getting stuck in that for too long. And it becomes this perpetual sort of, I have to say yes to everything. And I think if we really, and oftentimes it's forgetting to zoom out to the big picture, right? Especially when you're a freelancer or you're creating a lot of your own work, we look ahead, but very closely, right? We're looking at what's next month, what's next week, what's next month, maybe what's in a couple months. And it's a short-sighted view. And that can perpetuate sort of this, I have to say yes. But what we forget to do is zoom out, right? We have to spend time at a certain point in your career. I would say once you're young, you kind of say yes to things, you get a sense of, you get clarity by that, right? I would say a little later in your career, we have to be zooming out. We have to be looking at the big picture. And that's what I see. That's the mistake I see. People don't zoom out. They just keep going. And before they know it, they're 3/4 of the way through their career going, how did I get here? I never did that project, or I never did, oh my gosh, and it becomes that I call it the short-sighted trap, right? Where we only look just a little bit ahead. And zooming out is, for me personally, not what my brain does naturally. So I have to be intentional about that and spending time to say, right, let me pause. Let me zoom out. Let me look at the big picture. Let me look at the decisions I'm making. How do they relate to the big picture?
That's really good. Okay. I do want to come back around to burnout because I know that you talk a lot about that. What is the secret to balancing it all and not burning out? This is the $1 million question, Sarah.
It's so interesting. I was just talking to a colleague about this. I think it was yesterday. And when we think about burnout, right, maybe you're in a place where you're working you're doing 1,000 different gigs, or you're just working so much, right? Time feels like it is so scarce. And the impulse can be that you need to do less. But I don't think that's actually the solution. Because when I think about burnout, usually it means that your life is imbalanced in some way. If we think about categories of your life, for instance, maybe it's your career, maybe it's your categories could be your career, your personal life, your finances, your health. And we could look at categories in a bunch of different ways, but I think we can agree on those. My question would be, where do you feel in each of those areas? Usually with burnout, there's one that is exponentially like career might be, for instance, your energy is going only to that. And maybe your health, the percentage is really low, or your relationships, the percentage is really low. So it's not just that you need to do less. I would say we need to look at the big picture and figure out, where am I not filling my cup, right? What area of my life isn't getting that attention and that nurture? Because that is what's going to combat the burnout that you might be feeling. It's an imbalance. And I think about how once we start to tend to those other areas of our lives, it fuels us, right? It refills us in a way where then the balance becomes more manageable.
Mm. What are some of the things that you've found personally to fill your cup?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Since I moved to Boston, I moved during the pandemic, and I didn't know that many people when I moved here. And I also wasn't really freelancing. Well, nobody was during the pandemic. But when I moved here, my goal was not to build my freelance career because I wanted to make a shift. I was building my coaching business, which was largely me and myself, and I was looking to meet people. And so I had nights and weekends free because I wasn't gigging. And so I started just searching for things in my neighborhood to do. And I found a painting class down the street because I was like, I need to meet people. I don't know what to do. And it's been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. And I think in many ways, it's not related to music. And it doesn't matter if I'm good at it or not. Right? And also I can go to class. It's a weekly class. I've been doing it for 2.5 years now. It's a weekly class. I can go to class and I can get a lot done if I want. I can also go to class, stare at my painting, do a little bit here, chat with my friends, and get almost nothing done. And you know what? It doesn't matter. And so I feel that has been, it's changed my relationship to how I exist, right? Now my work has a lot of deadlines, has a lot to do. There's more pressure. But being able to have something in my life that doesn't have that I've learned so much from that. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think we all need something. I mean, we're all creative, right? But sometimes when we turn our creative into a career, then we we need something else creative to fill our cup a little bit.
Well, I think it brings me back to, with painting, right? It's really brought me back to the joy of something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot about this in my career, the why. Why am I doing this, right? Why do I play violin? Why do I coach? Why do I run my concert series? Why do I do any of these things? And when you're really in the nitty gritty, it's hard to stay connected to that, right? I've already talked about zooming out, right? How do we stay connected to the why, to the impact we're making? Because that's what helps ground us when we feel overwhelmed and burned out and all of that, right? We have to connect with that.
Yeah. If there were one thing that listeners could do as a takeaway from this episode, what would you want them to do?
I think about time, right? When we think about burnout, we think about time. I don't have time. There's not enough time, right? So I challenge my clients a lot to change their relationship with time. And one thing that you could do right now is I say, well, what can you do in 10 minutes, right? Something you want to do, right? Maybe it's you go for a walk, right? Or maybe it's career related, maybe it's not, right? But you have 10 minutes. I know you do. You know what? You probably have 10 minutes a few times a day, right? Don't underestimate what you could do in 10 minutes. So amidst feeling burnt out and feeling like there is no time, find 10 minutes here and there. Do something you want to do. Maybe it's spending 10 minutes brainstorming about a project you want to do. Maybe it's spending 10 minutes in your practice session playing something just because you want to. Maybe it's something not career related. Maybe you go for a walk, or maybe you do like a 10-minute yoga video, or that's how you start to change your relationship to time, right? Because I know you have 10 minutes.
That's really good. Thank you, Sarah. That's awesome. I would love to, we're going to pivot a little bit here. I would love for you to tell me about Beyond the Notes. I saw it on your website and I want to know what it is.
Yes, I'd love to tell you about it. So Beyond the Notes is a concert series that I started in my hometown of Concord, Massachusetts, 11 years ago. And Beyond the Notes is an interactive concert experience. So it's a chance for the audience to get to know the performers beyond what can be read in their bio. So when you walk into the concert hall, you're handed a Beyond the Notes pen and program with a note card, and you're invited to write a question during the show, and we answer them live on stage. So it's a chance to break down the barriers between the audience and the performers, create meaningful connection, really emphasize discovery and curiosity and learning. And it's so much fun. So I bring different guests in every show. I collaborate with them. I really showcase them. And it's really fun. It's sort of my baby, like thing I created.
Yeah. So most of my listeners are piano teachers and they do, studio recitals. Can you think of a way that some of that you've learned from that concert series could translate maybe into a studio recital?
Yes. Well, I think a lot about how can we creatively interact with audiences. And so that could be a lot of different things, but I think about a concert as an experience, right? It's an experience from the second someone steps foot in the door, right? It's not just when the music starts. I think about creating concert experiences. So that could be with, where the concert is, what is there in addition to the music. But I also, I'm hearing a piano teacher in my brain going, Sarah, I don't have time for that. Let's talk about the playing part. But that's the concept. That's where I come from when I think about these things. So I think about what creative things can the students do with the audience? How are the students introducing their piece? Would be my first question. And then my second question would be, how are they introducing it, right? Is it just the next piece I'm going to play is Minuet 2 by whatever? There shows my knowledge right now. I'm blanking on whatever, right? Doesn't matter who wrote it. But right, this composer was born in this date and written. Sure, we hear introductions like that all the time, but my question would be to challenge, how can you get creative with it, right? What is a way that you could introduce your piece that asks the audience a question, right? That interacts with them more. Or maybe you tell a story, right? We all can relate to stories, right? It's a great way to connect with people. Could you tell a story about why you love this piece or why you chose this piece? Or maybe your teacher chose it, so maybe that doesn't work, but right? So I think about that could be a moment of heightened connection, right?
Mm-hmm. Or have the parent introduce their child's piece. How fun would that be?
Yeah, there's ways, little things you can insert without having to redo the whole recital. Thinking about how do you enhance the connection between the audience and the performers, right? I think that could be really fun, actually. I love that. Yeah.
Just came to me just now. I like that, Sarah. Tell me, is there a book that has influenced you and the way you think and coach?
Yes, 100%. I was just talking about this book with a client yesterday. It's one of my favorites. So Adam Grant is I believe he's a organizational psychologist. I think that's his title. Adam Grant has a great podcast. He's got a bunch of books that are really impactful. But one book I read last year is called Give and Take. In this conversation of burnout, we haven't really talked about, one aspect that I see sometimes with burnout is people that are so generous with their time, they give it away, right? But then their own needs and their own projects and priorities go by the wayside. And so Adam Grant talks about, he has this one question that he poses. He says, okay, there's 3 types of people. There's the givers, the people that always are thinking of other people first, being generous with their time and their expertise. And then there's the takers, people that will only give when they know they're going to get something back, right? And then he has a third category, the matchers. He says those people sort of chameleon between giver and taker, depending on who they're dealing with, right? And his big question is, who is most successful? The givers, the matchers, or the takers? And at first, he poses who do you think is most successful, right? And he said people sometimes say, well, probably the takers, because they're really concerned on getting ahead and only doing things for their best interest, right? And the givers probably are at the bottom because they're so generous that they might let their own priorities slip in their health or whatever it is. And Adam Grant says he backs everything in research, which I love. He's done the research and he says, well, the results are this. It is true that givers are on the bottom and they're also at the top. And so this book is fascinating because then the question becomes, what is the difference between a giver who becomes at the bottom of the success ladder and a giver who's at the top? That's what the whole book is about. And it's just fascinating because a value of mine is generosity. And I think a lot about how can I be generous and boundaried in my business and in my life. And so that book just dives into that so deeply. And I think something I see in so many musicians is a lot of people that might have people-pleasing tendencies and sort of like, oh, I will just chameleon to your schedule or your rates or whatever, and can very much be in that giver category, which is a beautiful thing. But how do we make sure it doesn't run us dry?
That's so good. I'm going to check out that book. It sounds like one that I need to read it. So thank you for the recommendation.
Oh, yes. Well, let me know what you think, because I mean, it's a book I want to reread. It's really good.
Okay. I will check it out. I would love for you to share, because I'm sure listeners are going to be curious about your coaching services, what you offer. You mentioned a freebie or free something. I'll let you explain what you offer and where people can find you.
Totally. Yes. I'm happy to share. So I have a couple different offerings as well as some free things that I do for the music community. I have a one-on-one coaching business where I work one-on-one with clients. I also have an online group coaching program called The Thriving Musician, which is a small cohort of like-minded musician entrepreneurs working together. And I'll be launching that in later in spring of 2026. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. And then I also have free community events. I do monthly community events, and those are it's the Ask and Give Circle, which is one of my favorite things in the world. It's a mastermind style event. Musicians come together. We can share ideas, get advice from one another, bounce off things. It's a place to come and get unstuck, get inspired, and also be reminded that you don't have to do this music thing alone. They're so much fun. I usually have them on the third Wednesday of the month, and I'll give the link to you. You can put it in the show notes for people to RSVP if they're interested in coming. And it's a wonderful community. I love these events. And and then the other thing I will share is if anything of what I've said has resonated with the listeners, I invite you to join my email list. I've had people tell me that my weekly newsletter is like one of the best things I put out there. And it's totally free. I send out weekly newsletters of inspiration, a combination of mindset and business tips. And it's really my favorite way to share information. So you can get on that list as well. And I'll share the link in the show notes as well.
Great. And do you want to tell us your website or Instagram handle where people can find you?
Yes, absolutely. So you can go to my website, sarahwhitney.com, Sarah with an H, sarahwhitney.com. On Instagram, I am at The Productive Musician. You can also find me on Facebook, Sarah Whitney. I think I have a Productive Musician handle there as well. And we'll put those links in the show notes as well.
Great. Sarah, this has been so helpful. I have so many thoughts spinning around in my head from the takeaways of what you've shared. So thank you so much for giving your time and being here to share with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this conversation and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Sarah. I love the question Sarah posed, what do you really want? I think when I ask myself that question, there are 100 little voices in my head that start telling me all the reasons I can't do it or can't get there. Personally, I think that that's the work that I need to do around this, but perhaps something different comes up for you when you think about what you really want. It is a great question to check in with ourselves. I hope that this episode gave you some inspiration and some food for thought. Next week, we're going to be talking about performance anxiety, and I'm really excited to get to know my guest, Anastasia, and her journey to overcoming or at least being okay with her performance anxiety. That's the end of the show for this week. I am Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll talk with you again very soon.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.